Hello and welcome everyone. I'm gonna just give it a couple minutes for a couple folks to keep joining and then we'll get started. Thank you for being with us today. Like we keep having a few people join. That's great. Welcome, welcome everyone. I can see that there's folks from all parts of the world here today. So I'll say good morning, good afternoon, good evening. For some of you, it might even be night. Right. Well, I think we'll go ahead and get started. We are recording and we will share the recording and the transcript with you. Um, so you can have that as a takeaway. And so those of you who may be joining a little bit late, don't worry, you'll catch all the things. Um, so welcome to everyone. My name is Erin Clark, and on behalf of all of us at the Leading Through Institute, I want to welcome you and thank you for being here. We're grateful that so many of you are joining us, and as I said, from locations all over the world. And we especially want to thank you for your patience, given that we did need to postpone and reschedule this twice. Um, and I think that's a testament both to the topic, which is the human work of leadership, which I think is something that is both deeply needed and at risk, but likely mostly a testament to the far-reaching impact and reputation of our presenter today, Kim Clark. Just before I go into a little introduction of him, I want to orient you to kind of our format and what we're doing. After some brief remarks, we really do want this to be interactive, or at least as interactive as we can be in this format. And so some of you have submitted questions in advance. Thank you for those. We do have those. But we want those of you here with us live to also submit questions. And so there should be a Q&A button for you on your screen. And we would invite you to use that to submit questions as we go through our time together. We will be looking at the chat. You do have the chat function there, but we expect it might be a little bit challenging for us to filter through questions in the chat. But so please do use the Q&A button for questions. And so now with that, it's my pleasure to introduce our presenter, Kim Clark. He is co-founder and chair of the Leading Through Institute and co-author of the book Leading Through Activating the Soul, Heart, and Mind of Leadership. And he also happens to be my dad. And for those of you who know him, you know that that role for me and my six siblings, as well as that of husband to our mom, Sue, and papa to 26 grandchildren and a soon to be very first great grandchild. These are the roles that have mattered most to him and have been a really good forum for his own deeply human work of leadership. But of course, that's not the limit of his impact. His impact extends well beyond the boundaries of our family. He joined the faculty of the Harvard Business School in 1978 and became dean in 1995 and served in that capacity until 2005 when he became president of BYU Idaho, where he served until 2015 when he was named Commissioner of Church Education for the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, where he had stewardship for education institutions all over the world, serving over 1 million students from primary schools all the way through the university levels. In 2019, he likes to say he finally got the job that he'd been dreaming of since he began pursuing his career. And he joined the faculty at Brigham Young University's Marriott School of Business, where he's been teaching a course on disciple leadership until just last week when he taught his final class before he retires for the fourth time. He'll be retiring at the end of this semester. But as we are all here to see, that is not the end of his teaching. He continues now, and I I can promise will continue forever to teach in a range of different capacities. And so with that, I'll turn the time over to him. Dad.
Well, I'm really happy to be with you today, and I want to extend a heartfelt welcome to all of you. As Erin said, we've had to postpone this event twice because of an illness that put me in the hospital for 10 days in March. But I'm happy to say that I'm back and feeling well. Thank you so much for being here with us today for this webinar from the Leading Through Institute. I want to take a few minutes and share some ideas with you about the human work of leadership, and then we'll open it up for questions. As you can see on the screen, the Leading Through Institute is a learning and education institute focused on a more human-centered reinvention of leadership. And we want to help both individuals and organizations. So I'm going to talk today about the human side of leadership and give you a window into the kind of work that we've been doing, that we love to do with you. I'm going to read what I've prepared because I want to be precise and concise, but I am going to stop and ask you some questions along the way. When we get to Q&A, it will be a little more informal. Now, I want to begin today with this question. Why would anyone want to be led by you? Please take a moment and think about that question. How would you answer it? So I'm going to pause for a second here and give you some time to just think about how would you answer that question? So take a moment, just think about it, maybe even jot down a thought or two. Now, there have been times in my life when I worried that people might not want to be led by me. Here's an example. I had been at BYU Idaho as president for 2 months when we decided we needed to move to a 3-semester calendar and a full track system of admissions, where students would enter the university 3 times a year and have 2 semesters. So we held a meeting of all the employees of the university, faculty, staff, administrators, and presented the idea of a new academic calendar. But I could tell as the presentation and Q&A went on that it sounded like we favored one of the options, and this was just a top-down edict from the administration. That was not my intent at all. Later, I learned from 2 faculty that were sitting in the back of the audience that they turned to one another and essentially said, you know, it's too bad. That Clark guy seems like a nice guy, but his presidency is toast. They had decided that they did not want to be led by me. Well, when I got back to my office, I decided to ignore what had happened in the meeting and just do what we had planned, but did not explain well. We put out 13 options for a new calendar, set up discussion boards online, invited people to comment, and added other options if they wanted to. We held meetings with departments and had robust discussion of the options, and then we put the issue to a vote. The night before the vote, I decided to go online and read some of the discussion boards. On one of them, a professor whom I knew well had written a clever poem about Mr. Wallet, who had popped up with a way for the university to make more money. I decided to write a comment. I said that I thought the poem was very clever and well done, and that I was confident we would come up with a solution that would be good for our students and good for their outstanding teachers. I later learned that the people on that discussion board were astonished that a president would care about what they thought. I gained some credibility, and we did come up with a solution, and it has been great for the students and for their outstanding teachers. When you look at the question on this slide, please note the significance of the word want in this question. This is not a question about titles or positions. This is a question about the human connection people experience with you. The characteristics of being trustworthy, caring, and competent are the key elements of credibility. These are not personality traits, nor are they skills you develop. You cannot perform them. They're deeply woven into your character, who you are and who you are becoming. And this is crucial. They influence your connections with other people through their experiences with you. Now, for just a moment, I want you to ask yourselves another question. How do people experience me? This is a question leaders need to ask themselves all the time. And I thought it might be helpful for you to just ponder, how do people experience you? So think about it, because those experiences are really important. Let's go on. As people experience you, they assess you through three lenses, or what we might call sensibilities, directly connected to each element of credibility: moral, relational, and practical. So let's take a look at each one and identify the questions whose answers form the assessments that people make about you. As we do, I want you to think about how you would answer these questions. If you get a thought about something to work on, please jot it down. And if you have an idea you would like to share, please put it in the chat. So the first one is moral. The questions are you honest? Do you do what you say you will do? Are you consistent in how you behave no matter the situation? And here's a deeper and more personal question. Can I trust you? The second is relational. Do you care about other people? Do they know you care? And a more personal question, do you care about me? Do I belong here? Do you see me, hear me, value me? The third is practical. Can you help others make sense of challenges, solve problems, and move forward? Are you competent? And a more personal question, can you help me succeed? So how do you create experiences with other people that build credibility? At the Leading Through Institute, we believe very strongly that three metaphors capture the inner work you do that determines who you choose to become: the soul, the heart, and the mind. They define the human work of leadership, and each relates to a sensibility and to one of the elements of credibility. What you do with other people in these domains, therefore, what you say, the actions you take, the decisions you make, reflect your inner work and create the experience they have with you. In this sense, credibility is the authentic manifestation of your soul, heart, and mind. And you connect with other souls, soul to soul, and other hearts, heart to heart, and other minds, mind to mind. As your credibility grows, your human connections deepen. So let's be a little more specific about the soul, the heart, and the mind of leadership. The soul of leadership connects to trust. It involves the moral work of doing what is right because it is right, even when it is hard or inconvenient or requires change on your part. The soul of leadership requires disciplined alignment with values and purpose. The heart of leadership connects to care. It is relational work, helping people thrive. It requires disciplined attention to the needs and concerns of other people. This is the work of helping people feel connection and belonging, and it unleashes human potential. The mind of leadership connects to competence. It is practical work that fosters both unity of effort and innovation through initiative and freedom of action. It requires disciplined focus on principles, processes, and support that enable and empower people and teams. The inner work you do in the soul, heart, and mind is not an event, but rather a cycle of action, learning, and change that is ongoing and that yields growing credibility and capacity as a leader. There are two skills you can learn and apply that are critical to that cycle of growth for you personally and in your human connections with those you lead. The first is discernment. Developing this skill means learning to sense clearly the moral, relational, or practical issues you face, and then judging effectively what you need to do. The second discipline is discipline. Developing this skill means learning how to align actions with what is needed, especially when it is difficult, uncomfortable, risky, or inconvenient. Discernment and discipline are the skills that drive the cycle of action, learning, and change. Now, let me share a story with you that captures these ideas and all the others I've discussed with you today. The story is about Bernie Adams, a man who did not feel like a leader. So Bernie Adams is a musician and a graphic designer, and he taught design part-time at the college level shortly after receiving his master's degree. One of his clients was Deer Creek Enterprises, a manufacturing company with a strategy of acquiring small firms and implementing the DCE philosophy and systems to unlock value. Bernie's design work was so good, DCE offered him a full-time job, and he took it. Helen Lewis, Bernie's mentor at DCE, said, quote, Bernie did great work helping us design and implement training materials for our acquisition teams. But I noted his capabilities were much broader. He was amazing with the acquisition teams, clearly a teacher. I decided to put Bernie on the core team for Bear River, one of our very important recent acquisitions, close quote. So Bernie knew the DCE content well. He had been deeply involved in developing material to teach it. But when he was assigned to work directly with the team of Bear River coordinators, he was very hesitant. He worried they would be skeptical with little understanding of the new systems. Bernie really wanted to help them, but he felt like he was way outside of his comfort zone. Lewis commented again, quote, Bernie repeatedly told me he wasn't a leader. He always said he felt like an imposter. But I told him to just get in there and lead the work, close quote. Well, Bernie's approach was to get to know the Bear River team members personally. He worked hard to build trusting relationships where they could be open and he could help them problem solve together. It did not take long for the Bear River team of coordinators to embrace the DCE philosophy and work well together as a team. When DCE moved the Bear River project to the implementation phase, the Bear River executives, with the strong support of their coordinator team, requested that Bernie be the manager for the whole project. Bernie pushed back and resisted, insisting he couldn't do it, that it was only a matter of time before they found him out. But Lewis summed up Bernie's experience, quote, I encouraged him to just do as he always had and build relationships on their side and our side, and just forget about hierarchy or title. That is exactly what he did. That was 2 years ago. Bernie is now the leader of the acquisitions core team for DCE. He and his team are responsible for everything in an acquisition, from due diligence to full-scale implementation. Bernie is one of our best leaders, close quote. Now, Bernie Adams had lots of experiences with the Bear River coordinator team. Even though he did not think of himself as a leader, over time, Bernie developed credibility with the team, so much so that they pushed for him to be the overall project manager for the Bear River implementation. We can see in Bernie's experiences that the three aspects of who you are and who you are becoming are the triad of credibility: trustworthy, caring, competent. If you work to develop the skills of discernment and discipline, you will do the soul, heart, and mind of leadership more effectively because you will become more trustworthy, caring, and competent. Your credibility will grow and people will want to be led by you. So I want to remind you that leadership is human work. It's always about people. And effective leadership always happens through person-to-person experiences that you create with your soul, heart, and mind. So now with that, let's turn to our Q&A session and back to Erin, who will
All
moderate.
right. Thank you. Wonderful. We're going to monitor the Q&A coming in. I can see some coming in. I'm going to start with a question actually, Dad, that we got in advance.
Okay.
Um, and I part of what I love about this opportunity to ask you questions is that I know you'll have a good answer for this one. How do you help motivate individuals who don't want to be motivated? Understanding that their personal life circumstances and trying to help them move the work of the team forward, but they may not have the desire to contribute. How do you show them kindness, but trying to have accountability at the same time?
Well, you don't start with accountability. I know that. I think the simple answer is you have to get to know people really well so that they know you care. That's the most important thing. If they know you care about them, then you can teach them. You can find out more about, well, what motivates them? What is it in their lives that's causing them to not care about the work or not want to change? And with that insight, you can help them begin to see how not only will the work be better, but they will be better off. That's the key. You have to help them see how participating in a more powerful way in the work will really help them in all aspects of their life.
Love that. Um, I'm going to go to another question again that we got in advance. When a leader is faced with making a decision that will impact the group or organization, what are some effective tools for that leader to hear everyone's input and make a decision that is contrary to some of the input received? So hearing all of it, but also knowing that you're not going to make everybody happy.
So let's imagine the situation as a team. And so that's a small enough team, you can actually get to know the people. So it makes sense to think about getting lots of input. I mean, if you're dealing with 1,000 people, it's a different story. I can tell you about that story too, but let's talk about a small team. In
Okay.
that setting, a really key issue is not trying to solve this problem in the problem itself, but to step back and work with the team on establishing ground rules about, okay, how are we going to go about working on problems together that come up? How are we going to make decisions? And then working out a process for figuring out, well, how do we make decisions? And what the team feels is the best way to do it. Recognizing it's really important to get lots of ideas, but then we have to make a decision and we have to figure out how to do that. Once you get that established, and you can decide, well, is it, majority vote, or if we're kind of mixed, do we just wait until we get pretty much unanimity, which is really the ideal? But sometimes the leader has to be given the responsibility to make a call if the team is sort of split. And so you go through those different scenarios with the team until you got a good process. Then when you come up against a situation, you can apply the process that the team agreed on.
Yeah.
That helps you make the decisions better, I think.
Okay. So now we have a question though about that I think relates to what you avoided at first, which was with 1,000 people, how do you do that? But this next question is, how do you drive person to person leadership when you're running a large organization and can't build person to person connection?
Yeah. So, so I've been there. Uh, and I think a couple of things help. Uh, First, you have a group of people around you who you do have person to person relationships with. It might be a group as small as 20 or 25 people, just depends on the situation. But you have to make sure that in those relationships, you are setting a kind of an example, a tone, a standard for how you're going to work with other people. Like, how do you work with other people that are close to you? They in turn, and you have to teach them this, they in turn have interactions with lots of other people. And those people have interactions. And so you have to try to create within the organization an expectation of this is how we work together. This is how we treat other people. We listen, we learn to listen, we care, we get to know people, and it just ripples in the organization. So that's a foundational element. A second thing that's really important is you can, as a leader, even if it's a large organization, you can have person to person interactions with people you don't normally interact with. You can visit parts of the organization, you can wander around. I mean, the largest organization I've dealt with had like 1 million students in it, and lots and lots of people. But you can travel, you can move around, you can interact with people, and whenever you do that, you are touching lives, and you have to recognize you treat people in a way that is exactly how you want everybody to treat it. The last thing is, it really makes a difference for people to hear from you, even if it's over video or you know in a live broadcast. But you can talk to people all the time. You can get on and do live video stuff all the time, and just let people, and you can record it, let people do it, and you can go on, have town halls, interactive stuff all the time. That gives you a chance to interact with people. Sometimes when you're speaking, other times when you're just interacting. So there are ways, if you really, really care about it, there are ways to make strong connections with people, no matter how big the organization is.
I love when you've spoken before about big L leadership and what the scope of responsibility is for that, right? Which is this kind of organizational stewardship where it feels like you're so far away from the people or from most of the people that you don't have that ability to create the environment where that connection is felt. But I think what you've shared is the example of how do we do that?
Yeah, yeah,
All right.
it's an important distinction between big and little
Yeah.
L.
All right. So next question, how do you lead when you don't have formal authority? So when you're trying to persuade, for example, in this question, another department for which you do not have responsibility to take some kind of action that is needed for your group's success.
Yeah. So let me say a couple things about that. I think the principles are very similar. That is, it all depends on your relationship. So if you know that you're in a situation where you're going to depend on the work of some other group, and it's not just a one-time thing, it's kind of an ongoing thing. So here's a concrete example. Suppose you have P&L responsibility for a big chunk of the business, but you actually only control a small part of the actual operations that generate that business. You've got a supply chain, you may have marketing, you may have customer support, and you don't actually manage any of that. You have groups you have to work with. Well, you've got to build relationships, and you've got to make sure that they understand what you're trying to do, you understand their work, and you probably have to learn to compromise some on, what they're trying to operate. Let me give you a concrete example. Suppose you work at a great big, huge department store chain and you got 1,000 stores and you're responsible for some department like, I don't know, health. And you want to run a special promotion that requires a change in the way things work at the cash registers. Okay. Well, you don't control any of that. You don't control the stores. You don't control the labor force. You don't need that. But if you've got a really good relationship with the people who run operations, then you can sit down with them and explain the impact this could have on, the business and so forth. You can work and figure out how you could change your approach to match with the challenges they face. You become like a little team. And you can do that, but it just depends on the relationships you build with other people.
Yeah. I think a related question that's come in too is sort of relevant to this, like at a peer-to-peer level, right? When we're not talking about hierarchy or position, but just peers, where everyone wants to take the lead or nobody wants to take the lead. What's your advice for an approach that you'd recommend to be able to kind of have a positive impact in that dynamic?
So there's a couple of things. Again, some of it also depends on relationships you have with other people. But you got a kind of couple of strategies. One, you can just step up, and when nobody's taking charge or nobody's doing stuff, you step up and start, you know, doing things the right way. Meaning, you just don't have a dictator. You just have to say, well, what are the issues we face? Or what do you think is most important? Start with a series of questions, asking people, and you get people taking notes, and pretty soon you can help shape what happens. Sometimes that works. Sometimes you need to step back and listen. And then you can step in and say, I've been listening to this conversation. Let me suggest a way of thinking about it that I hope will be helpful. And then you can step in and help shape the discussion that goes. Sometimes it's a matter of supporting other people who are, you know, doing stuff. But sometimes it's stuff like I said before about setting up a process where you know from your experience that unless we have agreement on how we're going to make a decision and what we're going to look for and what our objectives are and what constraints we face, there's a way of thinking about how to make decisions. You're not going to get anywhere. It's just going to be people talking back and forth. And so maybe you step up and say, look, before we talk about this, I think it would be best if we really might be wise if we think about how are we going to make this decision and what are our objectives. So there's lots of ways that you can exercise leadership in an informal way, even though you don't have authority or power. And that or formal authority or formal power.
Yeah. And I think we would say we need more of that everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody, look, our theory it's actually kind of our philosophy is how everybody has the work of leadership to do in their sphere of influence and responsibility. Meaning everybody needs to look for ways to make things better and to take action in the appropriate way to talking to other people, mobilizing other people, help people to kind of see the opportunities and go at it. And that may be convincing only one other person. And then you work on something and then you present it to another group. And then pretty soon you've done the work of leadership.
Um, Next question from our Q&A. If you were taking the first steps in your career in formal leadership, so having just a little bit of experience, what would be the first thing you would focus on to build credibility?
So there are three, uh, we might call them the triad of credibility: trustworthy, caring, and competent. And they're all intertwined. They're not like completely independent of one another. So I think the first thing you do is you do a little self-assessment. You say, how do people experience me and then think about where do I need, where do I have some strength, where might be the weaknesses, and then play to the strengths and then work on shoring up the weaknesses. So for example, you might say, well, I think people perceive me as competent because I've had this experience before, not as a leader, but as a contributor. And they know about that. I don't have very much experience in the caring side because I've never really been involved in situations where I had to do that. And I'm not sure about if they know enough about me to trust me. And so maybe you start with care and you say, let's just get to know people. And just like Bernie did, you know,
Right.
just sit down with them and listen, say, tell me about, what's on your mind, a little bit about yourself. Here's some little bit about myself. You just get to know people. And you don't just start off by saying, I really care about you, because it will ring hollow to people. You don't know them. So get to know
Right.
them and listen to them. How do you feel about the team? How do you feel about what's been going on? What opportunities do you see in front of us and stuff like that? And over time, they'll watch you in action. And that's where you can prove you're trustworthy in how you interact. But a lot of it's centered on that relationship that you have with people. And but on the other hand, maybe they don't know you're competent. So maybe you work on that. I mean, you just have to play to your strengths, I think, first, and then shore up the weaknesses.
But recognizing that it's the combination of the three things
That makes a
working
difference.
together that creates that anchor
Yeah,
of credibility.
that's right.
Yeah. So we have a question about discernment.
Yeah,
And I think it's a really, really good question on discernment, how to develop the depth in observation and objectivity to judge effectively.
it's a really great question. Discernment, I think, comes down to your ability to recognize patterns and recognize patterns in data, in people, in situations. It's pattern recognition, and it comes with experience. But you can start by intentionally seeking to learn how to recognize patterns. And that comes from paying attention. You have to pay attention to discern something. You have to pay attention to what's going on. And if you don't quite understand something, then seek out information, and not necessarily just from Chat GPT. Seek information from very experienced
Definitely
people.
not just from ChatGPT.
No. And learn how to begin to recognize patterns. That's where discernment comes from, is paying attention and so forth. On the judgment, judgment it comes about through experience. And in the world we live in, we have to be very, very careful about what data we rely on. And so we have to get good at knowing, where's this data come from?
Yeah.
So you have to ask. Somebody shows you some data and say, look, this data shows this. You say, well, where'd you get this data? And they say, I don't know, I just got it off ChatGPT. You say, well, let's find out where this data comes from.
Yeah.
And where did it come from? And as you do that, you learn to exercise judgment about how good is the data, how good is the discernment that I've executed. And then you have to figure out, okay, once I see what the issue is, how do I then exercise judgment of what we should do? And that's experience. Now, you may have learned some things, and so don't discount frameworks, concepts, ideas that you've learned that really have proven valuable over time, and apply them. Uh, when I taught at the Harvard Business School, a lot of people used to criticize us for using the case method because they thought we should use, standard lectures and problem sets. And so, well, we had problem sets, but and and the comeback was, look, we're teaching people marketing, but what we're really teaching is judgment
Right.
by exposing students to literally thousands of cases and hundreds, almost 1,000 cases by the time they're done, where they are put in situations where they don't have enough information. They have to discern what's going on. They have to learn how to dig deeper, question the data, and come up with a judgment that probably is based on incomplete information.
Yeah. I love that you brought up the case method because what you've shared about discernment, and it relates to some of how when we teach this skill, and discernment is a skill. It's probably one
Right,
of the most
right,
core leadership skills. We talk about a power pause or the power in a pause,
right,
right? Which I think is
right.
part of the challenge of building this skill and exercising it is we get so caught up in the speed. And then we get caught
Yeah,
up in using things like chat and other kind of tools that aren't as deep or don't give us the full picture. And in fact, Joe Badaracco, who was one of your colleagues at the Harvard Business School, has written a lot about this step back, right? And the power that is in that
yeah, absolutely.
pause.
Yeah,
That's I think part of the challenge that we face in the world that we're in now. It's been this way for decades, really, but is the courage to pause because
yeah. Let me
that's
make a
what's needed to make a good decision.
Yeah, let me make a comment about that because I think we need to keep in mind that there are three kinds of sensibilities that are at stake. Three kinds of issues: moral, relational, practical. I think too often when we're talking about discernment, we get kind of wrapped up in the practical side of things, kind of key decisions that have to be made, like, do we do X, do we do Y? But boy, discernment is so important in personal issues, in the relational stuff, and very, very important in the moral thing. I had an experience once where somebody came to me and proposed a course of action for the university to take. And it was complicated. And so, it required stepping back and saying, what is this? What is this actually trying to, what is this actually? And it turned out that it was simply a way for someone to get a tax break by having the university do something that essentially, if not approving the tax break, sort of, like giving it the pass, but was not right. It was not right.
Yeah,
And so, but by taking the pause, we were able to kind of discern, this
not
is
right.
this is not right to do this. Yeah.
I love that. Um, we have a really good question about competence,
Okay.
right? And caring and trustworthy, but what if competence is where you're starting to feel unsure?
Right.
The example that's given is that you've got some outcome, the practical outcomes that you're driving towards just aren't hitting. And what does that mean? I'm not competent. What does that say about my competence? And what's to be done if I'm not competent or someone who's in that position isn't competent? And if they are, how can their competence in that or confidence in that competency be restored even though they get discouraging results?
Yeah.
It's a tough question.
So that's a really good question. So you could imagine it applying to an individual. You can think about any kind of situation where you have to execute something. It could be school, it could be, you're given a work task and you have to figure out how to do it and you're supposed to do it, but you can't quite figure it out. Or it could happen in the context of a team of people trying to get something done. In any situation like that, a really important thing to do, again, is to be self-aware and step back and think about what is it that's driving the outcomes that we're getting, that I'm getting, and help, and maybe even seek some help from someone else to help you sort through that. What's driving the outcomes I'm getting? and then figure out what aspects of the way we're currently doing do we need to change? And do I need to change? Maybe it's other people need to change too, because competence in the context of most organizational activities is not just about you as a contributor. It's about your competence in figuring out and helping the team or the group of people solve problems, how to structure the situation, how to go at it. And for that, you recognize I don't have the answers or all the answers. I got some ideas, but I don't have all the answers, but I need you. We need to work on this. How is what we're doing producing the outcomes we're getting? Like what's going on? And then step back and say, well, okay, what's really driving it? What can we change? What would that mean? How would we have to do it? And once that happens, and then you change it and you get better outcomes, then that's when people begin to recognize, oh, you're pretty good at figuring out how to get the team to work together and how to solve problems together. Now, if you're being asked to do an algebra problem and you don't get it, and you're having trouble with the algebra problem, what do you do? Well, you get somebody who can help you figure out what am I doing that's getting the outcome I'm getting? What am I missing or what am I not doing correctly? And then you can change and do it right, and then you get it. It's not, well, sometimes it is rocket science, but mostly it's not rocket science.
For most of us, it's not rocket
It's
science.
not rocket science. We're missing something, or there's some information we don't have, or we're not unified in some of the stuff we're doing, or some things are working at cross purposes, or I don't know, there's some things missing. But in a group setting, you step back and say, okay, let's work on it
Yeah.
together.
I think sometimes with competence, we tend to overvalue the technical aspect of that,
Right, right.
right? That's not the whole story, because part of, if we are just, our own self, right? Then we're not actually optimizing the work of the group, of the collective. And so part of our competence is our ability to recognize where we need other contributors. I love
Yeah.
that.
I mean, you may have a team and one team member is working on this and another team works on something else, but you realize, oh, this person over here actually doesn't know how to do this very well. But I know this person over here knows how to do it. Maybe you got to switch people or change assignments
Yeah,
around. There's a whole lot of stuff that goes into being competent as a leader. That's what we're talking about.
right.
Competent as a leader. And a lot of it comes down to the human work of leadership. Now, there are some other aspects, like you have to know something about what you're trying to do. But even, like Bernie was a great example. Bernie's not a manufacturing guy.
Right.
He's not any experience building products, but he goes in and he works with a team of people who do know what that is all about. And he gets to know them and they figure out how to solve problems together. And they start trusting him so much and seeing him as like super competent as a leader. That's what we're talking.
I love that. Okay, we have a next question. Um, could you share some examples of how you help leaders lacking trust in other people enough to risk leading through versus a traditional command and control approach? Do you want me to read that again?
Yeah,
Ultimately,
I'm trying to figure out the question.
so how do you change the leadership approach in an organization from leading from power over to leading through, or even convincing one leader in that type of environment? How do you get them to
Yeah.
trust leading through enough, I guess, to kind of let go of
Yeah.
what they know?
Well, yeah. Um, I'll tell you a place to start is actually not with a paradigm like the whole paradigm. But it's to start, I think, a really good starting point if you're trying to help people understand. You have to kind of figure out what's your relationship with that person. And is it a trusting relationship? And and if you get to know them well and they kind of know you want to share some stuff with them. If it's a whole organization you're talking about, we advocate in an implementation uh, in terms of implementing these ideas. We talk about starting with values, starting with the things. Okay, what do we share? What do we really believe in? What do we share? And what are we trying to accomplish together? You start there. If you're talking about leading through ideas in a team and you have some team members that aren't so sure, process is the same. Build relationships, talk through how we're doing and how we're getting the results we're getting, and then start suggesting new ways of thinking about how we might work together. But I really think you have to build a relate. If you don't have a relationship where people trust you, you're kind of dead in the water.
Right.
No matter how clever your ideas are.
Well, and part of it is also recognizing, what is my sphere of influence and opportunity? And for a lot of us, it's not the whole entirety of an organization. But
Right.
what is it? What is my sphere of influence and opportunity? And to your point, how can I build the relationships and start to nurture the principles anchored in the values that we share that kind of help lead us in the direction more towards a leading through versus a power over.
Yeah, here's another insight, I think. This comes, Erin, you have some great examples of this actually in your work. Um, but my experience and our experience at Leading Through Institute and my experience in my own leadership is leading through principles, which we've got a taste of today about soul, heart, and mind, about giving people freedom of action and so forth. If you teach those principles to the people doing the work, actually, people on your team, people at the operating level, people on the front line of the organization, you teach them those principles, they they will say, "Are you serious? Do you mean we could do this?" And you say, "Yes." And you could just be like a team leader. You might have a group of people that you work with, and you just tell them, "I'm going to teach you these principles, and we're going to apply them." And they teach them, and you ask them, "Well, how do you feel about these principles?" And they basically will say, "Do you are you telling us we could actually do this?" You say yes, right? You have this experience with some people you taught, right? That it's
Yes.
just a team. They went back to the team and told the team, "Here are the principles. Here's the teaching the principles." And the team said, "Do you mean we can take initiative and to really try to figure out how to change things?" And the leader said, "Yeah, I will back you." That's just a team inside, and we're going
Yeah.
to work our team this way. And that team just kind of exploded with ideas. And all of a sudden, that team's really functioning well. Their outcomes are much better. It's not because the whole organization did anything, because this was if I remember the one, this is like a big bank. And
Yes.
this was a group of people in cybersecurity or something. And they had lots of ideas. And the leader just taught them the principle, said, "We're going to operate this way." And
Yeah.
bam, went.
And I'll just add in that situation, what they shared with me was that over time, the effect was more, so yes, ideas, yes, better work, but the whole environment of the workspace and place changed
Yeah,
for them.
yeah,
Yeah. So
yeah.
it was just like felt. Um, I want to just, we're kind of coming to a close, but I do want to just note one more question because I think one of the things that we took great care as we were researching and writing leading through was, look, if we're going to talk about a paradigm of leadership, that better apply anywhere leadership is applicable, which is in any human cooperative structure, right? Any sort of
Right.
construct of human cooperation, leadership is not only applicable but needed and necessary. And so that meant that it should apply in the workplace, in community organizations, in government institutions, in churches, and in families. And so
Right.
as we wrote leading through, we talked about that a lot. I know we wrote it for an executive audience, but and I think that's something that we've tried to bring into how we teach, especially the human work of leadership. And we have a question to asking specifically in those contexts, in the context of a local church, kind of community organization, or in higher education, which you have a lot of experience with. What are some of the challenges or specific leading through things that you would recommend that are worthy of attention? And I think you've mentioned some of them, but I think if you think specifically about these contexts that aren't maybe in a workplace context, what recommendations would you have?
Well, I think the metaphors we use of soul, heart, and mind work really, really well. Uh, because the soul of leadership depends on the group, whatever it is, having a common set of universal values that they all believe in. And these are the standards we use. And a process that creates them that ensures that there's agreement and commitment that these are the values we care. And then the work of leadership is to help people learn how to consistently live by those values. And that's true everywhere, but in particularly in like educational institutions or churches or families or other nonprofit kinds of environments, you really have to figure out what you believe in and have a process in which that really holds true. And then you have to teach it over and over and over and over again. So if you do that, what you end up with is you end up with a vision, you end up with a mission, and a foundational set of values that define this is who we are, this is who we want to, this is the impact we want to have in the world, this is who we are. That's the soul. The heart is a commitment to helping the people that you work with thrive, figuring out what can we do what can I do as a leader, what we can do collectively to help each other thrive. And we've identified a number of things that are really crucial to thriving. But key to them is, people need to know that you care about them. And then you can do things. And they need to have, they need to be inspired and they need to have freedom of action and so forth. And the last one about the mind is you have a way of working together to get things done. And you teach everybody, and you have this philosophy that everybody has the work of leadership to do. And therefore leadership needs to permeate that organization. And in a lot of these kinds of organizations, if you unleash that potential that's in the people, you activate the power that's in them. Amazing things happen because they're all committed to the mission and the vision and the values.
Right. I love it. Well, thank you very much. This has been a great. I can't even believe we filled the whole time. We could probably keep taking questions. We didn't get to all of the questions that were submitted. I apologize for that. We'll take a look at those and maybe provide some answers with what we send around to everyone. We will share the recording. We will share the transcript. So I don't know if you
Okay.
want to throw up this last slide, Dad, that we have, just to give
Yeah.
folks an opportunity to learn a little bit more with us if you'd like. We have courses that you can access online, and we're always and actively building and creating more and have some exciting things that we're working on and look forward to bringing into the world, again, contributing to helping uh, lead through. Any final thoughts, Dad, before we close?
I'll just say thanks everybody for being here. And it was really a lot of fun. We'll do more of them. And I really want to underscore what Erin said. We've got some great stuff. And these are great bundles of modules and courses that really make a difference in your life and in your leadership. So thank you all.
Okay, and we'll share this material as well, and look forward to continue to interact. We look forward to doing more webinars together.
Okay.
Thank you, everyone.